So in the Anguttara Nikaya, I think it's a bhikkhuni, Gautami, she's asking the Buddha, how do I know if something is Dhamma or not Dhamma? And he gives her those 8 ways that you can figure out if this thing that is being taught or this thing that you are understanding is in fact the Dhamma.
Which things did he give her?
That leads to dispassion, doesn't lead to passion,
Right.
and so on. So for just taking passion, for example,
Yeah.
the Dhamma leads to non-anger,
Well, yeah.
not anger,
Yeah.
to passion, to dispassion, not to passion.
That's what I was saying in the past when we spoke about it. If it's not practical, in a sense of if it's not freeing you from suffering, if it's not freeing you from greed, aversion, delusion, it's not the Dhamma. That's the criteria. So if there is no practical application of it, that it has a direct result in dispassion, disenchantment, it's not a Dhamma, even if it's the Dhamma you're reading and talking about it in the suttas and nothing else. So the difference is the difference would be determined then by the way you took it on that individual level, personally. Because you can have people dedicate their whole life to Dhamma, study of the Dhamma, even understand the Dhamma, so to speak, but it's all on the level of ideas, which for somebody is the way to kind of enter the proper practical application of Dhamma, but it's not necessarily guaranteed, because it can happen that you just stay on the level of ideas, and then things can make sense, absolutely, and you can connect and find connections in your ideas in all the suttas. But are these ideas, when they're present in my mind, when they endure in my mind as ideas, are they resulting in me being unable to become passionate while those ideas are there, unable to be filled with ill will while those ideas are there, unable to be distracted while those ideas are there? And if the answer to any of this is no, it's not the Dhamma then. So that's the difference between like knowing about the Dhamma and knowing the Dhamma. You can have an absolute, fully familiar, expert Pali scholar, fluent in Pali and everything, and still be a Putujana, not free from any of the fetters at all. Know all the suttas by heart. Now, so that's what I mean. But you need some knowledge, but knowledge starts on the level of perceiving information and collecting information. So it's not knowledge in itself.
Right.
That which you perceive, that information that you gather, that you remember now, will become knowledge if you start applying it and if it starts having that practical effect. So if you think like, oh, I spend lots of time thinking about Dhamma, yeah, that's fine. But now you want to see, are those thoughts while I'm thinking about the Dhamma, are they resulting in dispassion while they're there? Or am I distracted on account of those thoughts? Am I distracted on account of my sutta studies? Do I get agitated on account of me exploring these different views and so on and trying to understand the suttas? If so, means you're not taking it on that practical level. So it's not the Dhamma. Which is fine if you recognize it, then you can sort of start, okay, so let me learn how to think without passion, without greed, without aversion, then whatever I think will be the Dhamma. Because that's what determines whether it's the Dhamma or not. Not whether you're thinking and reciting that which you read in the suttas and repeating other words. That's not what makes Dhamma Dhamma. It's whether those phenomena, when they're present in your experience, in your mind, are preventing you from experiencing greed, aversion, delusion. Are they making arisen greed, aversion, delusion decrease and non-arisen not arise? Or they don't make any difference to that. And that's when it comes down to, it's on the level of the view, because many people would believe that, I'm thinking about the Dhamma, I'm practicing the Dhamma, but they would not necessarily see, are those very thoughts, are they serving as a distraction, on the level of conviction, on the level of certain sort of inspiration only? Or are those thoughts really, while they're there, making me dispassionate. And then even when I'm not there, I'm dispassionate on account of those thoughts that I had. Or there is no such an effect. Or you can't see it, or you're still doubting it. If any of this is the case, means it's not the Dhamma. Even if the Dhamma is all you think about.
And one way you can see whether you know what you're talking about, if what you're talking about is the Dhamma, is through discussion with others who have an opposing view. Because so for example, like internet forums or one-on-one discussion, you know, but if you are speaking about the Dhamma and someone criticizes that view and you get angry, but still fully convicted,
that is the Dhamma.
conviction that you know the Dhamma, that should be the indicator that that's not the Dhamma that you have.
Well, that's not the Dhamma.
And in
so
fact,
even if the view that you've been talking about, it's all based, the suttas and so on, you are not seeing it on the level of dispassion, which means it's not the Dhamma for you. But you don't even need, I mean, that can be helpful, but even if you don't actually talk to others or engage in forums, you can just see it on your individual level, whereby engage in some reflection, or kind of some sutta, trying to understand, and then see afterwards, when you sort of get tired of it and so on, are you calmer, or are you just distracted and tired? Or are you brighter and sharper and full of energy as a result of it?
So what you say?
Are you agitated, or are you composed?
Sure. Any effort into investigating the Dhamma or dwelling in Dhamma should not, at the end of that, when you
should not be more liable to passion or ill will.
What the leftover will be, peace.
Exactly. So you need to then, that's what I mean, like you need to learn then how to think without greed, without aversion, without delusion, whereby your own effort or inspiration will not induce those. And then you cannot get angry, you cannot get passionate on account of thinking the things that are the Dhamma, because literally any phenomenon that arises in your mind is the Dhamma. Like that's what Dhamma is. Understanding of those things, understanding of this passion in regard to those things, that's the Dhamma as the practice.
So instead of what should you do if you want to study the
like you study and stuff, but as I said, you have to keep an eye on yourself in the process of doing so, and not start sort of, if you feel you're getting fatigued and lapsing and now you're doing it mechanically, stop. You have to stop and regain the composure, because that's the foremost. You can't have too much of the composure.
But also, isn't it about application, applying what you are
that's where it's applied. You start applying it by not basically engaging in reading, in study, in inspiration that's fueled with craving anymore. Because initially, whatever you do, you crave towards it, so to speak. It's underlined by craving, even your own thinking, and that's why you're not free from passion. But then you realize, wait, so I can think these things with craving, but these things can also be thought without craving, and that's what you start to learn. So that's what I mean. You learn how to think without greed, without aversion, without delusion. Because the only time greed, aversion, delusion arises when you lose perspective, basically when you lapse in terms of your self-awareness and get focused on the argument in point that you were making, even if it's with the right argument. And for that reason, that's not the Dhamma anymore. And that applies to like the broadest sense to the most particular sort of, Abhidhamma style discussion. Is this resulting in increasing of passion or not? If so, those ideas are not seen on the level they should be seen, or those ideas are wrong, one way or the other. Dhamma is only found on that personal level, not on the level of forums and others. It cannot be like that. That's why miracle of instruction that the Buddha would say. So you teach Dhamma to somebody, and if they get to see that Dhamma that you're seeing for yourself, they get to see for themselves, it's on the level of the miracle. Like flying in the sky and touching the sun and so on. And he said that's the only miracle he approves of. So if you do come across and say on the forum somebody approves, somebody disapproves of your view, if you are getting personally disturbed or defensive or something, means you are not clear with your own view. You were presenting it already with a preference, with a bias, with underlying craving. Because if you yourself were completely free from doubt in regard to that view, there would be no room for passion, because there's no room for doubt, no room for ill will, because there's no room for doubt, and no room for distraction, because there's no room for doubt. And then if somebody approves of that view, you will be like, yeah, okay, he sees the same thing. You wouldn't be elated on account of it. If somebody disapproves, you would just, the only thing that would reveal to yourself is like to stop wasting your time with that person. Not like because you're offended, it seems like, oh, it's like flogging a dead horse. So it's just you try, you get the point across, and they still don't accept, they still disagree with it, they still say you're wrong, fine, no problem. Like as many times happened in the suttas, even to the Buddha himself. When he would say something and person didn't like what they hear, so they said, no, I don't think that's the case. Like it was the children, wasn't it? Children are the suffering, the Buddha says, and that man says, no, I think you're wrong. Children are the happiness, and that's it. He didn't want to accept, and the Buddha, okay, so be it, friend. Oh, I have to go. Yeah, you go. I'm not gonna justify or try to convince you. Although the Buddha knows he's right and he knows why this guy is wrong, but he was obviously not willing to listen. So that's another thing. If you stop acting out of your passion, out of that sort of conviction or need to convince others, you will also get to see who could actually hear what you have to say or who wouldn't be having the right attitude right from the start. Because that's kind of obvious from the beginning, but people often don't see it because they're already passionately engaged with their view. So you don't actually have the perspective to see who would hear you, who wouldn't. So then you're just flogging a dead horse out of your own craving and need to be right or something like that. But I think that's in the nutshell, that's the nature of the whole online forums. That's exactly what it always revolves around that. Because most often, see, it's not even from the start, it's not, the platform is almost at a disadvantage for learning. Because everybody comes there thinking, oh, we're all contributing to the same. No, you either know or you don't know. If you know, you don't need others' contribution. If you don't know, nothing you contribute is of value until you know. So it's like blind leading the blind, arguing with the blind. Because if they were to recognize the blind, they wouldn't be on the forum trying to chip in or get a bit from here. They would be somewhere else learning that which they don't know. So you might stumble upon useful information in the forums, but don't expect great sort of learning insights, because if they happen, it will happen on your own effort, and again, not because somebody else who doesn't know helped you. That's impossible.
And there's that other sutta you mentioned, I can't remember the title, whereby someone was disagreeing with the Buddha and over again, and he said, isn't it wonderful how even though you've been people disagreeing with you, you're becoming even more brighter.
Yeah, he was brighter.
The Buddha's becoming even brighter and sort of.
Yeah, he was disrespectful.
Oh yeah.
That person, he was some Brahmin, I think.
Right.
He was not approving of what the Buddha was saying. He was disrespectful, interrupting him, more and more. But the more he was doing that, the brighter, the calmer the Buddha was.
Whereas other ascetics and Brahmins who would be.
Well, that was one of. It's in another sutta. I think that's when that's one of the criteria a lay person should use to see whether teaching is worth being followed or not. You find a teacher of that teaching, and when that teacher is cross-examined and questioned or disagreed with, is he getting angry and wound up? If so, you should not basically practice what he preaches.
Right.
Because passion, aversion, delusion. Nothing he preaches. Doesn't matter how lofty, how great, how well taught his ideas are. Look, he's passionate on account of it. There is nothing worthy there of following. So if I come and question you now, even disrespectfully, if you get angry on account of the ideas I'm presenting to you, you should be worried. If you just get annoyed with my rude behavior, that's fine, but that wouldn't give in rise to anger, or you really, you have to stop talking to me or something because you're furious now, which is what the Buddha would often quote in those other ascetics and Brahmins would get angry, would get how dare you question me? How dare you say that to me? So you want to see that for yourself. You don't need to go and start arguing with people. Just, as I said, when you read other things, you're going to come across things that are opposing your view. So internally you want to see, is there still need in me, for me, to defend my view or to prove that this is wrong because I feel challenged simply by the presence of opposing view? If so, you are not free from doubt. And by the way, this applies to any worldly view, any worldly standpoint, regardless of what it is. But when it comes to Dhamma now, it's even more relevant that you are not free from doubt then. Means it's not the Dhamma. But when it comes down to Dhamma, you cannot have a valid Dhamma view and not being free from doubt in regard to it at the same time. So that's the whole point when a Sotapanna becomes a Sotapanna, when he understands that he understands, whole world thinks one way against what the Buddha said, you would know that the Buddha was right because that's what the Dhamma is, which you've seen for yourself. So even if the whole world says, no, that's not the dukkha or something, but if you yourself are free from the dukkha, free from doubt in regard to dukkha, in that universal recognition of the certain, basically, characteristics of the experience, it won't waver you, it will not perturb you, it will not disturb you. You will just say, all these people are wrong. Not I am right. The Dhamma is right, the principle is right, I'm partaking in it because I understood it, but it's nothing to do with you. And you would know that, which is why you cannot be conceited on account of it. Which is not...
Or feel challenged.
Or feel challenged, exactly. It's me.
Defensive.
When you're self-centered, you're challenged, when you need to defend it.
Okay.
That's what the Buddha said, the one who understood the Dhamma, when they teach, they would, in the suttas, they would basically, they would not say, I know, I see, in that way, but it was like, this is how I understood, or this is how it has been seen. Because there's no need, even if it's factual, you did so for yourself. Other people start with their conceit, which means if you approach from that point of view, even through a habit, not necessarily being conceited, they will take it wrongly. So they won't actually hear the Dhamma, although they could have heard it. But if you bypass yourself and just present it in neutral terms, the way it has been understood by you or whatever else, if they get to see the idea, they'll see you are right. But that's what I mean. Internally, you can already see that for yourself on a daily basis when your views are challenged. What is the response in regard to it internally? Is there a rising passion or fear of the challenge because I might be wrong? All of that just outlines you what the work still is, and you have to do it.
So with mundane views, for example, political views.
Well, same.
Yes.
Same.
Abortion. Yes. Abortion. No.
Yeah.
You getting angry.
Well, if you're getting angry means so you're passionately defending it. If you have fully understood even a worldly view that is free from contradiction, clearly rationalized, like you understood it on a rational terms, not emotional terms, because it pleases you, but because it's free of contradiction, then you would not be disturbed even if people disagree. So if you are defending or getting angry on account of your view that you took, means you took it emotionally, not rationally. You're not clear, you're not free from doubt. So even worldly views on some on some contentious issues, if you are getting wound up, means you are not clear about those issues yourself.
Right.
So you're just now overly compensating with your emotional response of defense.
It's built on an emotional base.
Every view will start on the emotional base, exactly. But if you leave it there, that's when you'll be, irrational. And that is the same. It's irrational to get angry on account of ideas of Dhamma, because Dhamma and anger are incompatible. So the fact that you're getting angry because somebody is disagreeing with your views on Dhamma or whatever else means you're irrational, which means that's not the Dhamma. So whether it's a political view or whatever, view on abortion or other cultural aspects, if you're getting emotional on account of witnessing opposing views, means you are not clear about those views yourself. So that should be, instead of I must conquer all these opposing views, no, I must actually reevaluate my own views. And if I rationally arrive at the same conclusion that I've sort of gratuitously took through my emotion, that's great. But then you will not be so easily moved when those views are challenged, because you have clearly understood them, or certainly have greater clarity in regard to them.
Right. You know what is right, and it's got nothing to do with you.
Exactly.
Or how you feel about it. It is the way it is.
Yeah.
And so anyone challenging you,
it's just basic rational thought that's free of contradiction is your criteria, and you use that, and you come to a conclusion, and then you question that conclusion for yourself and see if it's contradiction proof. And if so, okay. Now if somebody presents you with a new angle that made you think, instead of shutting down that new angle because you think further. Thank you very much. Let me now contemplate further.
Because you don't see that person as necessarily contradicting you, but this idea.
The idea, yeah.
You see the
Even if
difference
that
between-
person is attacking you,
Yeah.
you don't need to take it personally. That's the
Exactly,
whole
yeah,
point. You look at the idea they're taking, it's like, oh yeah, they're ignorant in their personal attack. But the point they're presenting, actually, I haven't addressed in my own thinking. So I should. Not for the sake of shutting them up or having a good comeback. No, for the sake of self-clarity, based on ideas and values in regard to culture and experience it's quite important. And usually those people who do that were people who qualify as wise men of old, who would not necessarily be practicing the Dhamma, but they still had wisdom in regard to life, in regard to basically things people go through, regardless of the culture, regardless of the period. It's people actually who invest their time in their own thinking, not just because, oh, this is my view and I will defend it blindly like my religion or my identity or my nationality, but because, no, I reasoned it and this is the point. Free from contradiction. If you present to me something that I haven't addressed, haven't thought of, that's even better. So in that sense, so with the right attitude, discussion, you can then learn from it. But most people engage in discussion to either convince or kind of self-defend. By convincing you to agree with me, I kind of get validation of my own views. But again, just ask yourself, are those views free from doubt? Are those views, do I feel a need to defend them? If so, means I am emotionally bound with those views, which means I am irrational.
If you want to be right, or do you want the right idea?
Yeah, and then if you actually invest the effort into right idea, that will make you right.
So
And you wouldn't feel conceited on account of being right.
So that's the best kind of discussion. Two people are interested in the right idea.
Yeah.
So even though they don't have the right idea, still
They meet halfway.
there's a kind of
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So both of them are willing to step outside, or at least step away from that emotional basis of their view, and discuss terms on the level of idea.
Yeah.
And that space that you create by stepping out just tiny bit might be enough actually to reevaluate, and because emotions are not needed to hold the view at all. They obscure even the right view if you were to hold it rightly. It won't be right because you're emotional in regard to it. So you don't want to be emotional about any of the views, whether it's worldly or on the level of the Dhamma. So if you are, means you need more clarity, whereby if you develop it, there is no room for emotion to arise. So if somebody agrees with you, you will not be over the moon or feel validated. If somebody disagrees with you, you will not be upset or angry with them.
Because you can separate.
Even if somebody misrepresents you, you won't be upset with it. You'll try and correct it, but if they refuse and they keep basically like saying that you said that which you didn't, he meant this, but no, you did, like when in the suttas, the Buddha meant sensuality is not an obstacle. And it's like, don't represent the Tathagata, that's a very bad karma. It's like, no, not. This is what he said, this is how I understood it. And on that occasion, the Buddha was able to correct him, but I'm sure there were many cases when the people were just obstinate, when they refused, and then they were okay, fine, and just leave, not talk to them, they're done. Because there's nothing you would say that would change that. Whatever you say would just add to that misrepresentation already. Because that's often sometimes what people can feel wound up about being misrepresented. I didn't really say that. It was like, that's what the world is. It's just blind leading the blind in every regard. So you shouldn't expect to be represented correctly. Which means whether you're represented correctly or misrepresented, if you're emotionally disturbed on account of it, you are in the wrong for that reason. So even if the whole world is misrepresenting you, the whole world is against you, the whole world think your views are wrong, you should not be emotionally perturbed on account of that. And if your view is right, you will not be emotionally perturbed on account of that. And if you develop that, then you are truly in a position to help others. Nothing short of that. It's like a doctor who gives people medicine to people just so they will agree with him, just so they will praise him. Medicine might work or not, but it's not up to his knowledge, isn't it? It's just a chance. Or a doctor who truly knows what the cause is, what the cure is. He wouldn't care if the patient says, this medicine is bitter and I hate you and so on. He still knows that's the factual medicine. And if that person refuses to take it, he won't lose any sleep. Why would he? But if he was doing it for the emotional validation, for his great ego, because he's the greatest doctor, means you're a bad doctor for that very reason. You're not seeing problem clearly. You're taking it personally. And actually, I think even in the medical field, that's the whole point. If a doctor gets personally involved, he must be excused from the case. Perspective goes, always, even in mundane terms when that happens. So that's why I was saying that in slightly different context, but that's why there is no, if you start doing things on this level, there is no difference between like a study of the Dhamma and the formal like practice and application of it. Study becomes the practice. Practice becomes the further study.
The application.
Oh, I studied, now I have to go and apply it. Your study should be the application. How do you measure application? By basically dissipating of greed, aversion, delusion, and non-arisen greed, aversion, delusion is less likely to arise if you engage in these ideas and these thoughts and maintain them in your mind, cultivate them, bhavana. Cultivate certain perceptions, you will become impermeable to lust.
And how do you cultivate?
Not just think about, yes, this is what a subha is, and this is what ugly is, and this is the lust, and this is the... No. You need to cultivate it on the level whereby it applies to you on that practical level, so there is no lust in you, and there cannot be lust in you. So if you start, you will have to, as I said, inevitably start on the level of idea, but then you want to see, is this idea freeing me?
You want to find it here now.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. First you start, but then yes, you instead of, let me kind of start on this idea that I think I should start. No, just rediscern the idea is already there. That's already the result of doing things rightly. Or instead of me trying to kind of build up these ideas so I can contemplate, instead I just recognize what's already there and I see those ideas already around me. Idea of ugly, idea of death, all these contemplations. Because it is already there.
Yeah, exactly.
So instead of doing it on your own terms of thinking, you're just doing it on the terms that it's already presenting itself, but you're just ignoring it in the past. So that's what I mean, like, even if you practice mindfulness of the body, even that's an idea in people's mind. And you can, mindfulness of the body and having like an image of your body, and the moment you lose that image, you lost your mindfulness of the body. Or instead, mindfulness of the body is the idea, but instead of giving in to pursuing that idea, you go back to where the body is and rediscern the idea is already there. Because whether you think about mindfulness of the body or not, look, the body is seated throughout all that time, hands are moving, I'm speaking, all of this is already enduring. So that's what I meant when I said in the past, you find your body already doing things there, even when you don't intend. It doesn't require your intention to do it in that direct sense. But usually what people see, it's only that kind of body that appears after you intended to do things with the body. And that's why most people's meditation becomes that overly controlling kind of aspect of I'm sitting, I'm intending to sit, I'm moving, and you can't sustain that because that's actually secondary to the already living body that does these things. So instead of you fabricating these contemplations and ideas the way you think you should be practicing, you need to kind of refrain from that fabrication and then see the body already doing that and then discern sitting, walking, talking as already there, done by the body in itself. That's why Buddha said when a monk establishes his mind in first jhana, whether he sits, walks, extends his arm, goes to the toilet, whatever he does is done with full mindfulness and it's divine in that state. Because he's not doing it, he's just seeing it being done. Because the mind has withdrawn from greed, aversion, delusion.
Yeah, effortless.
So same when you're thinking, I need to, there's this sutta I read that made me think. You're going to go into that abstract direction, but instead of that, you sort of refrain and then find those ideas as already there, enduring on the level of present enduring body experience as a whole.
So you try find those phenomena that in the sutras.
So whether it's a subha, whether it's contemplation of death, whether it's body postures, whether it's thinking about base of nothingness, doesn't matter how refined, how it is, you want to find it as it is, present experience, enduring on that practical level, as I say, not on the level of these ideas which you might have to engage depending on what your kind of certain inclinations are. But if that's all you engage with, you're not anything closer to understanding. In a way, it could be worse as well.
Mm.
Because if you think those ideas are the Dhamma, you will then not be seeking them on the
Divorced.
practical level. Yeah, and then expect some practical result on account of you keeping those ideas in your mind. No, the only practical result is when you practically start seeing them.
And that's the cultivation.
That's exactly bhavana, maintaining it in the
Finding those
being,
things.
present, enduring. Yeah, that's what it is. Discerning it is already there, not on your own terms, the way you got these ideas and abstractions, but on the terms it's, oh look, it doesn't feel right when I think of the seated body. It doesn't matter how it feels. Is the body seated? Yes, that's it. That's your knowledge. You don't need to think of let me now practice seated meditation.
Mhm.
You are already seated. The phenomenon is already enduring. The body is already doing the sitting. So don't lose the sight of that. That is your meditation, regardless of how you feel about it.
And then all that sight of body sitting there implies all the other phenomena that are around.
Well, everything else will come from it, but
Nietzsche,
I don't want to give too much information because people end up having ideas about it instead of, no, okay, am I seated while I'm listening to this talk? Yes, I already know that. Do I need to now, I'm sitting, or I'll think about, no, it's already there. So all I need to do is not completely lose the sight of it. But it doesn't feel as active, as satisfying, as engaging when you actively engage and try to figure things out. Yeah, it doesn't feel like that because it doesn't have the craving. And your starting point is the point with craving. So craving will feel more normal. Craving will feel more palpable. Thinking with craving, meditating with craving, and so on. No, I am doing this through my craved determination. But if you stop using how you feel about it as a criteria, but instead, no, the idea of seated body is still there, enduring, and I don't need to maintain it, and it displeases me because I'm not doing it on my own terms, that's fine. Great. Now I have displeasure to be mindful of as enduring there, not as my own doing. So you realize whether it's pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, you will be seeing it for what it is enduring there in your mind. Not being pulled by it, not trying to get rid of it or prolong it. And that's also when it's going to become apparent that most people's meditation revolves simply around how they feel. So if you felt good, meditation was good. If you didn't feel good, meditation wasn't good. But feeling should not be the criteria for anything, least of all for meditation.
The discernment.
Well, exactly.
The clarity.
Yeah. The clarity in regard to the enduring idea, the clarity in regard to the enduring experience and the phenomena. The clarity in regard to whatever emotional current pressure you might be feeling.
Mm-hmm.